Tat Sat, divine blessings, everyone. Please let me know if you can hear me okay. The audio and video is good. The connection is good. Feel free to let me know if the music is too loud, the background. Tat Sat, Guru Ma, divine blessings. Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasya Dilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Dragunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Adorations to the Divine Preceptor, who is the bliss of Brahman, the giver of supreme joy, the embodiment of pure consciousness, beyond the pairs of opposites, vast like the ether, infinite, eternal, beyond all modifications. To that divine Guru I offer my adorations. Om Shri Gurave Namaha. Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Makashituk Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamaveva Shishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvashavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Welcome to Yoga Vasistha, Thursday evening Satsanga. I hope everyone is doing well. Please let me know if the connection drops or if there's any audio issues. I would appreciate it. This evening, we will be picking up on, we're on book 1, Yoga Vasistha. And you can purchase book 1 and book 2 on yrf.org, the Yoga Research Foundation that Swami Jyotirmayanandaji founded. And there's many other scriptures and other books that he wrote, like regarding and around the scriptures and the teachings. And we are on book 1 in Mumukshu Vyavahara Prakarana on page 143, section 12, the evils of the world process and the glory of wisdom. Sri Vasistha continued, O Rama, just as the ocean is the abode of all precious jewels, so you are the abode of all the great qualities of a spiritual inquirer. And verily, I am the abode of all the qualities needed in a spiritual speaker. Therefore, listen to the teachings of the scriptures. So for spiritual inquiry and spiritual aspirants and seekers of knowledge and wisdom, and that's what this part of the scriptures is actually covering, is the different qualities of spiritual seekers and spiritual aspirants. And so the great qualities that Sri Vasistha is talking about is basically like always ask questions to your spiritual teacher, your guru. Like no question should be off limits regarding the scriptures. It's good to ask them and it's good to question different things, but in doing so, we must put our ego aside. And when we approach our spiritual teacher and we approach a guru or a sage or a saint, we should do so humbly, and we shouldn't do it because of wanting to sound smart or wanting to debate or anything like that. It should be a sincere inquiry into the scriptures and what they're teaching. And so having like the qualities of honesty, being humble, things like that for spiritual aspirants. And then for Sri Vasistha, because he is Sri Rama's guru, his spiritual teacher, he's the abode of all the qualities that are needed in that aspect also. And so when we look at sages and saints and gurus and spiritual seekers, the ego is put aside. The attachments are not there. They're not in it for name and fame. They're not in it for money or to become famous and things like that. They do it as a duty. They do it because that is the purpose of this life, and part of the path is sharing the knowledge and sharing what is learned and the wisdom gained from the scriptures. And then this goes back for all of time, and learning to apply it for different like eras, like modern times and things like that. But everything is always applicable, just in a different way. And so looking for a spiritual teacher or a guru that is able to expound the scriptures in this way, and that person is also applying them in their daily life also. They're not just putting on a show per se. And so those are important qualities to look for. And then for ourselves as aspirants and devotees, there are qualities to develop over time and work on when we're on this journey. All actions and activities cease when Brahman is realized. Realization of Brahman, the Absolute, is the supreme goal of all movements in life. So due to our ignorance and falling under the veil of illusion in the world process and during those repeated cycles of birth and death, we identify with the physical body, and we identify with names and titles and things like that, and that's who we think we truly are. That's how we're defining ourselves. And through the process on the spiritual path, these actions and activities that we claim to do, like I do this, I do that, I do this, I do that, you do this, you do that, those kind of things, those cease, but not in the physical plane of thinking, like watching someone. We're not watching someone quit the like literal actions and just kind of sit there and do nothing. That's not what this is about. It's the actions and activities at the physical plane, like the worldly plane and the worldly way of thinking, they still continue, but it's our identification and our attachment to them and seeing ourselves as the doer, and we are not the doer of the action. And so when this is realized, Brahman is realized, and that is the Absolute, and that is God, and it is through this, through God, through Brahman, through the Absolute, that all things are possible. If such a goal did not exist to be realized by the pure-minded, why should one have to go through the painful process of enduring the sufferings of the world? Aspirants would have found it easier just to give up their lives. So Sri Rama is asking, why must people have to go through the painful process, all these sufferings of the world? And we see this happening everywhere. We see people suffering, and we suffer ourselves during this process and on this path. And everyone goes through it, and these sorrows, the pain, the suffering, and the grief, all these things are for a purpose, whether we understand that or accept that or not is up to the individual and where they're at on their own personal spiritual journey. And so for each person, it's going to be different. Seeing things in the world that would be labeled as bad or negative, things like that. And a lot of like the events where people question God's existence and why would God let this happen? And so the goal of this life, and part of it, is the goal of self-realization and God realization, and understanding and learning that we go through pains and sufferings in the world because the soul is on this journey and going through this process of evolving and changing and growing, and we're slowly removing certain aspects or demoniac qualities that we've had over time and through numerous embodiments. And so through the numerous embodiments that the soul goes through, things become more pure And then when you become pure-minded, that's when Brahman, the Absolute, is realized. So that's why we go through these sufferings while we're in human embodiment. And so if this goal didn't exist, and there wasn't that goal to be had and this path to walk on, it would just be easy for people to give up. It'd be easy for people to give up their life and quit, in whichever way you want to look or define quitting life as. I know Facebook kind of censors certain words. But people would find it a lot easier. And we can see this happening in the world when there's a lot of mental health challenges going on, and people are struggling and they're going through a lot of pain due to different circumstances. And it's a lot easier through their eyes during that time because their thinking and rationing mind is kind of blurred. It's a bit blurry. It's a lot easier to give up than to keep pushing through and pushing through. Om Tat Sat, Aisha, divine blessings. A snake gives up its skin and glides on. So a snake with when they shed their skin and they leave that weird, my brain wants to say carcass, but that's not the right word. Om Tat Sat, Christopher. So the snake sheds its skin and glides on. In the same way, a man of wisdom, having given up his mental griefs and anxieties, abides in the absolute self. For him, the world becomes like a magic show. But for one who is devoid of wisdom, this world is the source of all miseries. And so when you think of the snake giving up its skin and shedding its skin, and it just keeps on going in the same way, that's how our human embodiment is. And so the soul goes from one human embodiment to another one, to another one, to another one. And in this process, we gain this wisdom and we shed away, because of the wisdom that we gain and what we learn and the experiences we have, we begin to give up our mental griefs and anxieties. We realize the illusion with all of this and how, in a way, we've set ourselves up for it. And over time, a realized person, a realized soul, abides in the absolute self. Because one who abides in the absolute self, they don't have attachments. They do not go through the grief and the sorrow and the pain. They still perform their duties. They still perform their daily actions and do what is necessary to live. But for him, the world becomes like a magic show. So it's, in a way, it's the witness to a magic show. So you imagine sitting in an audience and you're watching the magician and all these tricks are being performed. So that's kind of like us. We are the souls in the audience and we're watching a magic show. And the magic show is the world and everything going on in the world. And yes, these things are happening. Because a lot of people like to argue, well, things are tactile. You can touch things. You can visually see things happening. You can hear things. You can use your senses to describe these things. And yes, you can. But the world becomes like a magic show in the sense that it all passes. It's all temporary. And all of it will end. There's no permanence. But for one who's devoid of wisdom, this world is a source of miseries. So one without the wisdom and one who isn't exposed to scriptures and spirituality, Satsanga, and things like that, where they haven't been walking on the path. They haven't been on the spiritual journey yet because it's just not their time in the divine plan. So to them, the world is the source of misery. And so they see the world as to blame. Everything external is to blame. There's no internal blame. And not in a shameful internal blame, but more in we take responsibility for our own actions and our emotions, and we're in control of our actions, we're in control of our emotions. And by understanding that and applying it to the current embodiment, we have to think of applying it to the previous embodiments also. And this gives us the understanding of karmas and the karmas that are coming to fruition, because they can be immediate, they can take a really long time, we don't know. But something that has gone on in a previous embodiment, that something that we did can come to fruition in this current embodiment. And so it was because of an action that happened previously. It's not really due to anyone else. It's kind of like looking at a giant equation of karma, and everything is connected together like this big map. And so it's not the world that is the source of miseries. It's the individual souls that there's no responsibility being taken. There's no ownership. There's no, like, the veil of illusion is just so thick, and there's no understanding of the power of the mind and controlling the mind, controlling the emotions. So this part gets very, very descriptive. So it's really good. Attachment to the world is the source of all sufferings. So when we're attached to things, we don't want to lose them. We don't want to let them go. And if we do lose them, which is inevitable, if we do let things go, which is inevitable, we suffer. We experience heartache, depression, anxiety, stress, anger, and going through all these emotions. And it's due to the attachment. So you can think of someone who might be really, really attached to their car, if they have like a nice sports car or a fancy car or something. Just kind of anything. Just think of being really attached to something and you can't fathom losing it or not having it. And if you imagine that you do lose it and you suddenly don't have it, what kind of emotions are you going to experience? How are you going to think about this happening? And so that's a practice that I like to do, and it can be challenging sometimes because you're challenging the way the mind is conditioned with these attachments, because we all have attachments to family and our loved ones. We could have attachments to jewelry, things that you own. It could be anything, really. So the attachment and the sufferings, it envenoms a person like the poisonous bites of a snake. So once it puts its fangs in you, once it puts its teeth in you, it hurts at first, and then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. It slays a person with the sword of agony. It pierces a person with the spear of grief. It binds a person with the ropes of mental interpersonal dependencies and burns him with the fires of pain. It blinds him with the darkness of ignorance and knocks him unconscious by hurling the stones of disillusionment at his head. It robs him of his reason, destroys his integrity, and hurls him into the dark wells of infatuation. It infests him with the white ants of cravings and churns him through the cycles of birth and death. So as I said, it's pretty descriptive in this part, but it does a really good job at explaining attachments and what comes from the attachments. And if you paid attention to the words, it mentions agony, grief, it binds a person, pain, the darkness of ignorance, disillusionment. And then it goes on to say it robs him of his reason, destroys his integrity. And this is a really applicable and important snippet of the scripture, because when we have attachments and we're pretty deep in our attachments and something gets in the way of it, or we lose it, or we can't have what we're wanting, it can rob us of our reasoning, of our critical thinking. And when we aren't being reasonable and we don't have critical thinking, we can lash out and we can act out. And I know we're all guilty of doing this, losing our temper, being short with somebody, being angry or upset. And this can lead to destroying the integrity, your character. And so you can think of like a modern term like keyboard warriors on social media. And so all it takes is someone getting upset or something getting in the way of someone having something, and the reasoning goes out the window. And then when reasoning goes out the window, the patience goes out the window with it. And so the integrity of the person is now kind of shaky, and they can lash out, and people get in trouble, get arrested, get in all different types of situations. Attachment is a dread disease like cholera, because it forces one to identify with the body of flesh, blood, and waste matter. And the web of its contagion is spread out in the form of numerous entanglements with relatives and friends. So, like I mentioned earlier, our attachment can also be to our relatives and our friends and our loved ones. And that is something that pretty much every soul is going through currently in human embodiment, unless they are a self-realized saint or sage, and these attachments are just completely not there. And so it's like a disease, and it keeps manifesting, and it just keeps taking over. And it's because they're identifying with our body, and the body it's just flesh, blood, waste matter, fluids. It is a walking meat suit, pretty much, with a soul embodying it with some intellect, and that's about it. But we attach ourselves with the physical body and what we look like and how we are perceived and how we perceive other people. Here in this world process, the souls are pelted with the stones of afflictions, cut down by the swords of grief, and thrown down from the cliffs of transient enjoyments. They are burnt with the fires of sufferings, and chilled in the icy regions of frustrations and fears. They are powdered like sandal paste on the stones of obstacles, and driven through the thorny forests of bitter circumstances. So it's still very, very descriptive. And you can, like, literally imagine being pelted with stones and how much that hurts. And those stones represent afflictions. Or being cut by a sword, and that sword is grief and that pain and that agony that we would go through. Or to fall down a cliff, and that cliff represents transient enjoyments. And all of these things that it mentioned, all these descriptions, is due to our ignorance. It is due to that illusion, that Maya, the cosmic illusion, that veil of illusion, and our ignorance of not understanding who we are in our core essence. And so until the soul reaches self-realization, or you could say attains self-realization or experiences self-realization, I'm not quite sure what term to describe it, but until that happens, all these afflictions, all these sufferings, we're going to suffer, we're going to feel, we're going to grieve, and these things just pull us down. These emotions pull the soul down, and just deeper and deeper and deeper. They are forced across the burning sands of adversities and are beaten by the torrential rains of afflictions. And so we all go through adversities at some point in our human embodiment. They are slain by ignorance again and again through numerous embodiments. How can they enjoy peaceful sleep in a world where they are being choked and suffocated by the forces of darkness? And so Sri Rama is asking all these questions, and he's wondering all these things. And how can someone attain peace in a world where, how can the soul attain peace in a world where it goes through so many afflictions, so many adversities, so much attachment? Christopher has a question. Tat Sat Miraji. He says, so do you think it's attachment or the attachment to a desired outcome? So those can be two separate things. So it depends on the context that you're asking. The attachment, you can have attachments to physical objects. You can have attachments to emotions, because people can also get attached to the feeling or the emotion that they think that something is giving, that they think something is providing, because due to ignorance they don't understand that that object is not the source of that joy, the source of that happiness. And then you mention the attachment to a desired outcome. And so that's also another type of attachment, is being attached to the desired outcome. So there's, in my opinion, and I'm trying to think of how to explain it. So the attachment to a desired outcome, in a way, there can be like a healthy attachment. People could be attached to their spiritual journey and the outcome that they would like to see come from the self-effort that is put in. And so that attachment is kind of like a positive driving force, as long as they understand that that outcome that they would like to see happen might not happen in this human embodiment. But then there's other situations where an attachment to a desired outcome is, it could be as simple as a high school student wanting the outcome of passing an exam, and then they are very attached to it and they studied very, very hard, but then they end up failing the exam. And so they end up going through the pain and the grief and the suffering and the disappointment. And that's experienced because they were already attached to an outcome that was being ego-drivenly predicted. And so it kind of depends on the circumstance, but suffering as in a human embodiment and living in the world in a human embodiment, the attachments to anything you think of, and the attachments to desired outcomes is what is going to cause suffering. And those attachments is because of our ignorance. And until that ignorance is thinned out and our egos are let go of and our expectations are dropped, then we will continue to suffer. And you can kind of apply attachment to anything. It's such a broad thing and it's different for each person. And so you can just kind of think of different scenarios and like a situation that you might be in where you would have a desired outcome. You want something to go a certain way. That could be with career, relationship, education, a project you're working on, and then something comes in the way of that. Something comes in the way of you attaining that desired outcome that you expected and the emotions that you're going to go through. And it boils down to ignorance. And in the spiritual journey, the term ignorance is not used as an insult. The term ignorance is only used to define a lack of knowledge, and that's it. So it's not used negatively to describe somebody. I just wanted to be clear about that. So I hope that kind of helps. You can always message me if you want to talk about that more. So they are forced across the burning sands of adversities and are beaten by the torrential rains of afflictions. They are slain by ignorance again and again through numerous embodiments. How can they enjoy peaceful sleep in a world where they are being choked and suffocated by the forces of darkness? But those sages, O Rama, who are endowed with the armor of wisdom and are devoted to meditation, repetition of mantras, and the performance of sacrificial actions, they are not affected by the miseries of the world process. They are endowed with the light of spiritual vision. Being fully satisfied, they live like Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. And so Sage Vasistha is explaining to Sri Rama that the enlightened sages and the enlightened saints, that they have attained this spiritual vision. They have the light of spiritual wisdom and intuitive vision. They're not affected by the miseries of the world process. So they're not affected by attachments, and they're not affected by desires, and they're not affected by things that can happen around them. Like if you think of Swami Sivanandaji would teach, like if someone was saying hateful words towards you or about you, and you basically suck it up and you don't argue back, so you bear insult, bear injury. And so sages and saints, they have this under control because they have the mind under control, and they are very devoted to the scriptures. They're very devoted to meditation, repetition of mantras, performing sacrificial actions. And so that sacrificial actions can be both orthodox in a way, very according to the scriptures, step by step, when you think of like pujas and various ceremonies, but it's also in the mind. It's sacrificing the ego and relinquishing that and giving up that desire of control and that desire of expectations that not only we put on ourselves, but we also put on other people that might be involved in our life or that we come across, or just in general. Like we make assumptions about other people all the time and unconsciously put expectations on them, and that can be rooted down to ego. But sages and saints and the enlightened beings, they don't do this because they see other people as other souls that are on the spiritual journey, and other souls that they're kind of like on different levels and different embodiments, and it's all depending on where that person's at. And due to the intuitive vision that they have, they understand this and they see this in the person, and they could be watching an individual lashing out at them and be sitting there totally content and listening and hearing insults and all sorts of stuff. But for the enlightened sage, they're not going to get angry at this person. They're not going to tell them to shut up. They're not going to be mean or cruel right back to the person, because they see underneath and beyond the physical plane. That person's not just a human body. It's a soul that is suffering. It's a soul that is still under that cosmic illusion. And so there's so much compassion and there's so much empathy towards all the suffering souls in the world. And we can see this in all the different sages and saints, and the things they did in the world and how they helped people and all sorts of things. Okay, so Guru Ma responded to Christopher's question, So I just wanted to read it, so in case anyone else doesn't see it. Guru Ma says, it depends on whether it's a good spiritual desire attachment or a worldly greed desire attachment. Wanting to be liberated is a desire also, but it's a good desire. It's okay to be attached to this desire, but as one moves to higher planes, even the desire for liberation goes away. If one wants 5 cars or houses due to a hobby or ego to be rich and do 3 jobs to attain that, then it's a bad attachment that has to be reconsidered by a spiritual person, because no time left for integral yoga. Job and spirituality has to be balanced. Divine blessings. So yes, our spiritual practices, and this is like the essence of integral yoga, is everything is integrated and holistic, and there's a synergy, everything works together. And that's where these scriptures, if you look at them as a guidebook to life, they have been applicable for centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries. So even in modern times today, everything in the scriptures can still be applied. And we just have to adjust and adapt and do things a little differently. And so that's where we have that responsibility of, like, if we are householders and we're parents, we have that responsibility of raising our children and keeping them healthy, make sure they go to school and raising them in a good home, etc., etc. And any other adult that has a job, you have to go to your job to make money in order to buy food and pay your bills. And so there's that practicalness where you have to take all these things into consideration, and at the same time you have that priority of your spiritual practices and your spiritual journey. And so you integrate these things into your daily life and you make time for them. Thank you, Guru Ma. That's a really good explanation. So we're finishing a few minutes early, but I didn't want to go ahead and start on the next section, because the next few sections are kind of like a topic in itself. It all goes together. And Swami Jyotirmayananda has actually written a totally separate book regarding this topic. So it's the 4 gatekeepers of the Palace of Liberation. That's what the book is called. And so for the next few weeks, we'll be going over the 4 gatekeepers. And it's a really interesting topic, so I just wanted to mention that, so in case anyone wanted to go ahead, and you can purchase the book on yrf.org, and they're pretty quick with shipping, and the books are extremely affordable, and I don't know if there's any online copies. There might be, I'm not sure about that, but I can always check. So thank you everybody for attending and for the very good question. I enjoy questions. Questioning is how we learn. And no questions are off the table with me. I welcome any questions. Yes, Sada Shivaji, the 4 gates to the Palace of Liberation. It is a very, very good writing that he did. So yeah, the next few weeks we'll be going over that topic within Yoga Vasistha. I pray that everyone has a good evening, a good weekend. All the ones who are suffering, come to peace in the body and the mind and the heart. And the ones struggling through physical challenges or mental, emotional challenges, that the Lord gives them strength to overcome these challenges and come out victorious. And I pray that everything is going well and how it should for everybody, and everyone have a good weekend. Tat Sat, divine blessings.